Yeah, hello everyone. For the people online and the people in the room, welcome to this session organized by the Data Versioning Interest Group. The theme for today is what do we actually mean when we talk about the data versioning. And sorry for delay. We have some issues in the room facilities, and people here are very helpful to get that up. Okay, how do I move slides? Oh, right. I shared from my computer in the end, not the room computer. Yeah, yeah. Oh, why I cannot move? Sorry, why? Yeah, I can't move my slides. Oh, okay. Which one? Which?
Yeah, this one.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Thanks. It seems like we have an issue with this short link to the collaborative notes. We are about to fix that out. I'm not sure if you scan the barcode, if you are able to get into the collaborative notes. When it's accessible, please put your name, affiliation into the session notes. For online people, if you have any questions, you can type them into the Zoom chat. Thank you. Okay, the phone link is in the Zoom chat to the collaborative notes. Thanks, Rob. Okay, here is the agenda for today. We will have an introduction of these interest groups. Then we will refresh on the data versioning principles that is output generated from working groups that presented to this interest group. Then we will reflecting on the outcome of this group session at the plenary 22 and another workshop Yan organized on Berlin University Alliance workshop. So based on these two outputs, then Yan's and his colleagues wrote up the data versioning practice guideline. That will be key discussion point for today. Yeah, sorry, I already. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I forgot to introduce the co-chairs of this interest group. Yen's online. Yan is from online and joining us from Perth, Australia. Yan, yeah. And also we have Kirsty in the room and myself, another co-chair, Leslie, unable to join us today. Okay. So Yan, do you want me to give brief introduction to the group?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay.
Do you want to move to the next slide? So
yeah.
this group has a history. It started out as a birds of a feather meeting at the plenary 8 in Denver, to where we sensed that there was some need in the community to have a look at versioning. What do we mean by versioning, and what is this? This seemed to be going beyond just getting a handle on large dynamic data sets. So with that BOF, we saw that there was quite a lot of interest. So we set up an interest group that launched at the Plenary 9 in Barcelona. And we've met since then. We've then saw that beyond just meeting as an interest group, there was actually some work to do to develop what later became the principles of data versioning. And so that led to the constitution of the data versioning working group at Plenary 11 in Berlin in March 2018. That went through its usual life cycle, and we presented the results of this working group at the virtual plenary 15 in Melbourne online in March 2020 for adoption by the RDA Technical Advisory Board, and then discussed the future of the working group and agreed to continue as an interest group. So we've since then transitioned to an interest group where we continue to promote the adoption of data versioning principles and work on emerging topics in that field. And since then, this work in the interest group has been going on, and today we're at plenary 22. And our topic today is advancing data versioning from principles to actionable recommendations. The next slide. So the interest group has three specific goals: to promote the data versioning principles, to develop recommendations for the adoption of those principles, and to provide a forum for discussion on issues relating to data versioning. And so that's all in our agenda today. So next slide, please. The data versioning working group produced two outputs, a collection of use cases around data versioning that at the time where we released the first version of that had 39 use cases, and we are now at 54 use cases. We kept collecting new examples, and we published a report, and we also published a more abridged version of the data versioning principles. And then there's also a peer-reviewed paper in the Data Science Journal that discusses the data versioning principles. And I think I'll hand back to Ming for or Kirsten for the session objectives.
Yeah. So give brief introduction of this interest group. Now we move on to what we do for this session. So so as Ian said, the working group made the output is 10 principles, but the feedback we got from RDA community and other group we communicated, the people desired to have actionable recommendations. So the principle
Hold on a second, please. We are having an issue with the internet in the campus. We will back right in a second. Hold on, please.
Okay, thank you for the waiting. We are back. We are just connecting the speaker to the Wi-Fi, and she will share the presentation in a moment. Thank you very much. Can anybody speak just to be sure you are hearing us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We are almost ready.
Okay, Jens, I'm unable to connect. So Jens, my computer is unable to connect to the internet. There was a blackout here before. So could
Okay.
you please try to share slides from your end? Do you?
I'll try and do that.
Okay.
You have to share the screen and
Yeah. Could you get
yeah,
this?
sure, yeah.
Could you get this go away? So where we were up to, yeah. So now we move on the refresher on the data versioning principles. Yeah, Yan, please take over.
Okay. So for all the detail, we refer you to our publication, the 39 use cases that we use as the basis for developing the data versioning principles, and it's all discussed in the data science journal paper. You see the DOI at the bottom of the screen, and what we use the functional requirements for bibliographic records further as conceptual framework. We know that this is not particularly popular among everybody, but it turned out to be quite useful, and we've discussed it many times whether there are any alternatives, but even though it's a bit involved, and I will explain it in a moment, we still think that it's the best framework for explaining different kind of versioning patterns. And from applying this framework to the use cases, we developed 6 foundational principles that we see as patterns in data versioning. So I've mentioned Ferber and also the discussions around them. There was a suggestion at Plenary 20 that we might use BibFrame instead because it's slightly simpler. But then we decided not to adopt BibFrame and stay with Ferber. And also we are aware of the fundamentals of software versioning. They have informed many of the discussions and the principles. So when you look at many Ferber illustrations, you see a diagram like this one on the right, where there's a work that is a distinct intellectual or artistic creation. It's realized through an expression. It's embodied in a manifestation, and it's exemplified by an item. That is all super abstract, and so to explain what this means in the context of data, we've come up with this illustration, which I think still needs a bit of fine-tuning to better explain what we mean, but we're getting there. As a little anecdote, through all this history of data versioning and data citation, and even going back further, I wondered how would I refer to the Greenland ice core data, the delta 18 oxygen curve from the work of Dansgaard and his team. Would I refer to the Nature paper, or would I refer to the data set that I downloaded from Pangea? And applying further to this situation turned out to actually resolve this. So applying my interpretation of Ferber to this is that the work, the intellectual and creative effort of Dansgaard and his team is to come up with this work on the Greenland ice core. It's expressed as a Nature paper, and it's expressed as several data products. One of them is the delta 18O curve. The Nature paper is manifested as a print version, and it's also manifested as a PDF. You can probably see the print version on many library shelves around the world because Nature is a widely distributed journal. But you can also download the PDF version from Springer Nature. So there are plenty of items of the print version around, and then there's the item on the Springer Nature server that you can download. And then going to the data product, the delta 18O curve, there I found two of them. One is at the US National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, and it's in one type of CSV that you can download from their server, and it's another type of CSV, a slightly different arrangement of the data, is at Pangea, and you can download it from there. So those two manifestations are very close to each other, but they're still different. And I think that's worth distinguishing. And they're certainly separate items because you download them from different servers. That's kind of applying further to all the different levels of how we encounter works, including data products. From in the six, in this case, it's 5 data versioning principles. What we identified that most see versioning as version control. That's something we're familiar with from software development, and that's called revision. And it's quite easy to tell that there has been a revision because the bit stream changes. So when there's a change to the bit stream, you get a new revision. What you do with that was the question of what are the actionable recommendations. And the principles often say it depends, and that's a bit unsatisfactory, and that's why we just wanted to develop actionable recommendations. The revisions, after several revisions of a data product, you decide that you want to release a new version. And here, the difference between revision and release is that a release is a curatorial and editorial process where somebody makes a decision to release something as the new version. And here it's really important to communicate the significance of that change. And semantic versioning that you all know from software versioning of the 1.1.1 and similar things are one way of communicating the significance of a change in a release. But we also have to look at granularity because objects don't always come alone. They can come in collections or aggregations, time series. Then they can also come in different formats, and that's what Ferber calls manifestations. It's the same content, but it's a different format. And then we have the derived products where provenance comes into play. And I think there's still work that we need to do, but it's certainly important to describe how information of a certain object was derived from a precursor object. So there's also other drivers that are important around versioning. One of them is that we want to be clear who we attribute a data product to. There's authorship, there's authority, identity, and that touches on ethical aspects. And then we want to know, for the sake of reproducibility and provenance, exactly what it is, which object are we referring to. We want to use this to be able to identify data quality, and also different processing levels. And then there are other needs as well that can come into things that where a data versioning can help. So we wanted to briefly reflect on two events, the previous plenary and the Berlin University Alliance workshop. At the previous plenary, we asked questions and asked the participants to fill in, to add their questions and statements to an online document, and that gave us a lot of material to work with towards actionable recommendations. So one of the questions was, what constitutes a new release of a data set, and how should it be identified, and why is there new release? What is the significance of the change from one release to the next? How do we communicate that? Then if we edit the metadata, but the data set doesn't change, should we version the metadata, or what happens to versioning here? And how should provenance be expressed in the versioning history? Is that through release notes? Is this through the identifier itself? There's still questions that need to be discussed. Should a release be named or numbered? And I think that's something where communities have different practices. And does this relate to manifestations? So just format changes, but same content. And how does this relate to the item level, which is important for the data centers hosting the items? With all this material, in the project team at the Humboldt University in Berlin, we set out to develop actionable guidelines for the Berlin universities, and then ran a workshop on the 28th of June with about 40 data practitioners. You can download the report of the workshop, but it's only available in German. But you can download the presentations and the draft recommendations that we developed from that project and the workshop. And the main findings were that citation practices are still not well established, and that includes how we present the metadata and whether we version metadata. We found that there are conflicting aims between authors and facilities on citation practices. Then there's also a question of what does persistence of the repositories themselves mean for versioning? Do things sometimes need to move? What happens then? Certainly the recommendations on versioning need to be illustrated with examples so that it's easier to understand how a certain pattern applies to something you see in your practice. And the same applies to the terminology adapted from FURBA and the Open Archival Information Systems Reference Model and other reference frameworks to use data examples to illustrate what they mean. So I hand back to Ming to lead us through the next steps in the agenda.
Thanks, Yan. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so please move to the next section. So we come to the group discussion, then we will go through the recommendation by recommendation from that document to test out if it makes sense or any gaps we should fill in to improve the recommendation. So Jens, could you move on to the next slides? So first the recommendation is about the revision. So the revision, the data or metadata goes to revision all the time. So revision is like when you data object handles the change in the bit stream. That's result a revision. But how to track the changes in those data object? Here are the 3 recommendations for file-based data, basically stored in file system. Then the recommendation here is to use systematic file and folder name, up to individual persons. This recommendation is more for individual persons to manage their files and folder and naming folders and file names accordingly, for those long tail data collectors. And then there is another the recommendation for also for file-based data. For more advanced, if you can use Git, you can use Git for track the changes. Then Git works for small files. And then there is a data versioning control, the application for larger files. So if you use Git or data versioning control system, then you were able to share with your collaborators instantly. Your collaborators can see what changes. While the previous one, you can only see the change on your computer or a cloud, whatever you store. But for there is another type of data, dynamic data, that's usually managed by a relational database. Then that system automatically recording each of change. So there is recommendations from RDS dynamic data working group. So please read their recommendations. So basically each changes should be time stamped, and then user will, according to timestamp, to retrieve the snapshot of data at that point and have a DOI on that. So, so based on this, is anything we are missing here? Yeah, Kirsten.
Yes, I think what is missing is a different type of dynamic data that we observe, especially in the geosciences, which are somehow continuously measured and archived time series for GNSS data, for satellite orbits, for all these time series data. And this is a different type of dynamic data because the RDA Dynamic Data Working Group has developed their recommendations for a database that is collecting increasing number of information, for example, like typical is the diatomies or like geochemical databases where you frequently add new data to the very same database. So if you did the search today, you would get a result, but if you did the same query in 5 years, you would not get the same result. And the Dynamic Data Working Group is addressing this issue by recommending to provide an identifier for the query that is attached to a timestamp of the database. But this other, which is very, very often the case in the geosciences, for example, is not included here. But I would also ask do we actually need a version for this continuous time series that are actually file by state? But when people ask me whether I would need they would need a new DOI every time they add a file, which is every 15 seconds, I would say no. We make a new version of the data when the processing is changing. But this is something that I would at least include in the discussion here.
In the long form of the recommendations, this particular case of time series is actually discussed. So the way Kirsten just described it, that is discussed in the document, and there are then recommendations on what to identify and when. And the analogy that I like to use is that of a journal time series, where there's just one catalog entry for nature and not 5,600. And there's a new item being added every 2 weeks. And still the series has its identity. Then we can get into granularity discussions, but those are, I think, very use case specific.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but Jens, coming from the library point of view with the series would be one option. In practice, we call this a DOI for a data product. And these data products may be specific ongoing time series from GNSS measurements, or, which would be another type, is a seismic network DOI. So they actually provide a more general DOI for citation purposes and do not identify each individual file. The question is, however, if the same data product is distributed through different data centers, whether this needs to have a new DOI or not. And these are ongoing discussions, at least in the geodesy.
I think, Jens, I'm not sure if it's you could share that recommendation document, because there is examples illustrated like a time series data about the collection items when item changes, you know, what coming out. Yes, do you want to let's look at the time. Yeah, probably we goes to this recommendation first. If we have a time, we go back to the document to look at the examples.
Yeah, let me quickly pop the link to the document into the chat, if I can find the chat.
That's great.
Oh, sorry, wrong address, meeting group chat. There we are.
Yeah. So for each of these recommendations, there are at least I think one or more examples in the recommendation document. But let's move on to the next recommendation. So so data changes all the time, so revision happens all the time. And some revision may not make it to public, like you know, but some will be made public. We could release. So so basically, when data set go to several changes, then you want to make a new version of data set to other users. That's called a release. And then this process, as Yan said, involve editorial process. When you release, you have to tell people what changes made from one version to another, and also probably the version numbering also indicates, you know, you have like a major change or minor change as such. So the recommendation is the data manager providers should establish workflow for creating and identify a data release. It's just like a software, you know. We have You know, for this iPhone, you have a release from time to time ask you to update to new version. So it's a similar workflow process there. Then for each release, then you should have a release notes, what to communicate what changes made. And that's information usually called the provenance. Okay. Does it make sense or any gaps here? So
Well, this describes what is common to software development, and that some data centers are also using it. But I wonder if there's a machine readable way to do so, because what we do at GFZ when we make a new version of a data, we add this information in the associated data description document, which is provided as PDF, which can be, of course, queried by Google and other search engines. And we add it to the abstract or to one other description type, but there is no dedicated version history. Maybe this would be something if the versioning systems or principles are more adopted to discuss with the data site metadata working group, where we can make a dedicated field, not only for the version number, but for the changelog, that you find it in a specific tag in the metadata file that can then be used for your machine learning and Leslie's NCI thingies.
yeah, that's a good suggestion. Yes, so
Yeah.
the format of release notes, yeah, so that could be added to recommendation. Yeah, make a machine readable release notes. Any other comments? I'm not in the Zoom now. I'm unable to see how many people online now. Any comments from online? Who is sharing the screen? Oh, how many people?
I'm sharing the
Okay. How many people online? Oh, there are 12
12.
people online. Yeah. So any people online would like make a comment? Oh, is the chat? Could you bring up chat? Yeah. Okay. So if there are no comments, we can move on to the next recommendation. That's about granularity and items. And yeah, so definition of the granularity is related to data product, the expression that, you know, as a collection that maybe have a set of data items and also number of files, item expressing files associated with this data product can be very large. This probably relate to Kirsten's question before. The recommendation is the collection. We should identify the collection as an item. Then in the case, very large collections, you know, then have millions of objects in that collection. You know, some species may have many subspecies as 100,000, then persistent identifier for individual in that collection should be Minta DOI. So in that case, you would be very precise which item you are talking about. And then for time series, in which data appended, you know, probably yearly, monthly, and that can be identified by one persistent identifier. This also, hence I remember example in the document you can look at. And a subset can be identified either by defining canonical path, from the collection, you can follow that path, you can do the item, or by using template pairs. Yan, do you want to add anything to this?
One thing that needs further discussion is if you have a collection of very, very many items and you change one of those items, what does that mean? This is where the significance discussion comes back into play, that maybe it doesn't mean much, but it could potentially be game-changing. It really depends on the case. If it's a game-changing change in one item, then that certainly merits a new release. But if it's a minor bug fix somewhere, what does that mean? Would we still do a minor release? Would we just gloss over it and not mention it? That's not clear at the moment.
Any comments from online participants? The people in the crowd here?
I'll ask slowly because I realize that not everybody who's online can hear. Okay. I've worked with rainfall streams, okay, where some of the weather stations stopped working. And then the people who were analyzing the data more or less live created interpolations for the stations that were not working. And then like a month later, they got the real data and they replaced the interpolations with the real data. So what do we do, or what do you recommend in such a case?
Yeah, that happens all the time with those sensors. Then sometimes when sensor broken or sometimes have faults, then so that's probably sometimes the data is missing. You add new data, that's a new item, or sometimes that you capture things probably put to wrong angle. You capture things you are not wrong data, then you correct the previous data. Yeah.
This is for financial decisions by the Brazilian Agriculture Ministry. Okay, so whatever corrections were made, they had to review their previous decisions. So we really need to keep track of the versions together with the decisions.
Exactly. Yan, do you want to make a comment before I pass on to the next person? Okay.
It's so
Yan,
yeah. So just to put the recommendations into context, they were developed for the Berlin universities, and as the data versioning interest group, we want to see how we can use this as a basis for more general actionable recommendations for broader use cases. And the challenge is that we might have very different requirements in the highly regulated environment. Maybe we might need to be very, very precise about all the changes, and in politically contested environments like the IPCC reports, again, we need to be very careful about identifying all the materials we worked with. But in other circumstances, it might not matter that much. And how do we then address these different use cases as in general recommendations.
Well, I would like to give a very pragmatic answer. Be as transparent as you can. And that's what I'm doing. Collect version histories and associate them to the new version. Say there's new version. I usually add the date and I describe. I filled the missing gaps for station A, B, C, and it exchanged it. And if the data are for whatever purpose assigned with the DOI, you have to keep the old version anyway. So I would keep the old version. I would make a comment, and for the time being that there is no overall agreed standard to provide such versions, just collect the information and put it as a PDF. That's what I would do.
That's what we called release notes. That there's a note going with the data release that explains what it is and how it has changed from the previous release.
Yeah, no, can you hear me? Okay. I have a related question, but it's not, so in bioinformatics, I'm a bioinformatician. What happens a lot is we collect existing data that we download from repositories, etc. Many different sets of data, we put them together. It's like also machine learning, obviously. And then we sometimes have to curate them. So in the end, we have a new set or a collection of data sets, and we publish that paper. And anybody that wants to reproduce that often has to actually go to the original, whatever 10 repositories, download them, and then curate them themselves because this data is not well annotated. So it's a new version of the data. And that's going to happen more and more as people run AI and pull data from different places. You need to have a way of storing it somewhere, just in Auto, etc., but also version that. And then it might be curated. This might be happening by other labs that use the same data and is also fixing it or cleaning it.
One gap we noticed in the data side metadata is that a data site can point to related objects, but there's one specific attribute missing, that is to show which of those objects is the authoritative version. So if there are many copies around that have been downloaded and mirrored onto other servers, at the moment you can't as a machine distinguish them. You don't know which one's the original, which one's the mirror, and that I think needs to be amended.
Yeah, Jens, I fully agree, Kirsten here. But and this comes to teaching the users, the researchers, the repositories, the DOI minting agencies about the meaning and the requirements to make proper citations, because this would somehow erase your question on the what is the authoritative, because the first DOI for the data would be actually the first object, and any other representation must cite the first object. So you can by following the related identifiers back. But this is
I would disagree.
Vision, which is you would disagree.
I would disagree because sometimes there are good reasons to mirror data onto a different server for sometimes performance reasons, and then pointing to the original source would lead to the wrong source.
Yeah, but you have the is identical to, or is a variant form of relation type in data site, and you can use them. But that's the point is that this is not automatically done. And
yeah, but I think
I would not.
Sorry for interrupting.
So what I mean is that if you have the same data distributed through different servers, and that is one of your use cases, then you have to let people know that these representations are existing, and there are means in the data site metadata. You can say is identical to, or is variant form of, I would not say it's new version of, but it's variant form, which could be used for identifying each representation. But the actual application of this is still in the very early stage. So people do not, sometimes they're not aware of, or like we had a data set, a polymagnetic data set, just a very small table. We published it through GFZ Data Services, and it was then as a use case for the EPOS multiscale laboratories. We have also made the same data publication publicly available through MAGIC, the polymagnetic database, in a different format, because they have their own format. And they didn't let me know when they have assigned the DOI, and they didn't add the citation, but I managed to work to go to a workshop, so I saw that. And this is something where that sometimes you cannot do this machine readable, because it's somehow you have to inform people. There's no repository who gets information from the publishing houses that a paper is online, but you need the paper to link it to the data. So this is everything we need to really make it more available. And having your use case, I would say if I used a data set, I would be obliged to cite it. And sure, but still you cite your input data. And even if these are 100, you should cite them. Yeah. Yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, no, but that's, I think, a very normal use case also for other data.
This related to reproducibility of that. Yeah, so actually we have a few the recommendations to so have 15 minutes, so let's move on. Then probably some later, recommendation presented related to the question you just discussed. So Jens, please move. Yes, the next one is mirroring and republication. So that's, when an item be mirrored or provided by different services. So recommendation here is when you mirror or republish data, that should always refer to original authoritative version. And for example, data site metadata has this relation type is identical to link the authority version to the original, to the mirrored version or republished version. But there is a gap in the data site metadata current version that does not identify, say this is authority. You can say this version is identical to that version, this data product is identical to that. If two other mirror ones, you cannot tell which, still cannot point to authoritative version. So, yeah, any comments? Yeah, so that's the original, the data collector, but yeah. Yeah. Yan, do you have any comments? Who make
I couldn't hear the discussion.
Oh, the question, who makes the call saying this product is authoritative version?
Well, that's something that we would need to work out. If that is the original publisher who then says, I am the authoritative version. Or the mirror that says the authoritative version sits over there.
Yeah. So any comments, more comments from online people? We haven't heard any comments from online people. Is there anything from the chat? Oh,
There's a question about data collection in the context of citizen science. Where I don't have a spontaneous answer because I'm not familiar enough with the specifics of citizen science projects and data collection. but that's an interesting use case that we should investigate to see whether we can apply the principles to this situation as well. And what does it mean for citizen science projects?
Yeah, maybe there are examples from library. They do ACRs. They use cloud to correct the, text from OCRs. Then to see how they manage that. Yeah, so probably another use cases. We should yeah. So we have, let's see. 4 or 5 to go. Yes, could we move on to the provenance? That's I think that's mostly it's deleted item. Okay, next one is a deleted item and a retraction. So that's where self-evident what is a deleted item and a retraction. So here recommendations. So so when you have a item or collection there, you always have page has a landing page display. But even data set was restored, that the landing page should be still there and make data clear. Say data is like deleted or retracted. But if the metadata is not available, neither, then that metadata is on, but that page, the DOI should also resolvable. You have information there, say what happened to that metadata and the data. The second one we encountered many times, that if you don't have that tombstone page, then that DOI then is not reservable to that data link. And for the retraction, is a similar display the metadata with appropriate release notes, saying that data has been retracted. I think the publishers doing that all the time about this. Yeah.
Well, I have a question to this. If I look into data papers, which are specific papers describing data, and good data journals require the data to be online with a DOI. At this point, I don't like to see a tombstone page, because that data had been carefully reviewed and everything. So you could, instead of saying I remove the metadata and the data, you can, I would always have, you need to have a backside loop where you can query the data nevertheless, because if the journals start to try to reproduce the data and they don't come to the same results, they might retreat the paper. But the paper has been published with a full peer review and everything, so there's some issue we should address in that.
This isn't for casual cases. This is really for catastrophes, where the tombstone would say this data center was destroyed in the fire of 2045, and therefore neither the data nor the metadata are available anymore. There's something really drastic like that. It's not for somebody just mishandling data, not managing it properly. But it's really for the cases where something went catastrophically wrong.
Okay.
It touches on the whole trust principles and the trustworthy archives. So in a trustworthy archive, this situation shouldn't happen.
Yeah. So actually, like for Research Data Australia, we very often counted to the second case, like a birth data, metadata not available. Then we just, even not the 404 error, you could identify, then they have a page somewhere say this data and metadata system moved to another system, but it does not give any link. So that's, yeah, anyway. So Jens, could we move on to the next one? We have a few, like 3 or 4. We have 10 minutes. So next one is provenance that we talked a bit in the granularity ones. So how to track the record history of the change, either data set or metadata. So we talked about release notes before, should should have information what have been changed, and then or you use the Git, if you use Git platform, then that have revision management for you to use. Yeah. Any comments? Quick comments? It seems clear. Yes, move on to the next one. And the format, that's a manifestation of expression. So it's actually the content. Expression is content, the manifestation is data format, like is a data expressed in CSV file or in JSON. So so one expression maybe have different variant of manifestation, and Ian gave example earlier. But there are no known examples here. We haven't encountered any examples that manifestation of data has been separated, identified with PIT. So usually you have like a expression, then under that you have several, say, this is a CSV file, this is a JSON file, this is like a what any other format, but listed under one expression. So yeah, so if you see any kind of examples, please add into the Google Doc. Yeah. Yeah.
A remark on that. We also might have data sets having multiple data files of different formats. So we might have mixed formats in this single data set, which is at the moment, at least in data site metadata, difficult to express.
Ian, did you hear that?
Yeah, I did. That would be, if we could add that to the use case collection to see how that fits into the framework, how we could explain it.
Well, I would add a question to that. Is the data site metadata schema really meant to be so specific to answer these questions? So there might be other metadata schemas that can make the connection. And if you came to me in like, okay, I'm running a long tail data repository, I would just say, let's put all the different representations under this one DOI and let people select whether they would like to use ArcGIS or any other.
Well, that's the idea of the expression being manifested in different formats.
Yeah, but it's not different expression of the same thing. It is one data set containing multiple different things, each of them having a different format.
Yeah, that would be, if we had that as a use case in our collection, then I don't think it makes much sense to analyze this in the next 6 minutes, but it's certainly a very good question.
Yep. Okay. So Yeah, it's good this is recorded. We can use the caption. Next one is a citation. Because when data Ian said is earlier in 4 parts of data life change, different people involved in different stage of change. So what the credit should be given, to this or distributed along this revision history. So recommendation is citation still follow the established practice for citation in scholarly communication, but is not universally accepted by all journals. Then credit is given to creator of the data product by citing the expression, but when the infrastructure made a data item available, should we give credit to how do we give credit to those infrastructure? If they don't have this information, it's hard for them argue, who paid for this infrastructure. So yeah. And any comments? Yeah, we move on. Yes. Then the versioning of metadata. So that comes. So yeah, if data hasn't changed, metadata changed. So this we have these use cases exist. So as we didn't look at the detail in the P22 the notes. So some people say yes, some people say no, there is no census. Should we version metadata or not? And how?
And I would even go further. There is no such thing as the metadata. Any statement on a data object is metadata. And you make several different statements on that. You can say this data product has been cited at that point. This is one metadata item. And depending on, so what is data and what is metadata is in the eye of the beholder. There is no clear distinction of that.
That's true. So when metadata quantity keep improving, should you version that? So when you use the first release, say data set, you didn't put a data dictionary, later on improve quantity, add the data dictionary to metadata, should that metadata versioned? So, but there are no sensors on that. Yeah, so we will look at this further. And move on. So versioning system, what the system you keep track of versioning? So here a set of foundations.
Sorry, Ming, looking at the
Yes.
time, we have 2 more minutes.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll just skip ahead to
Okay. Yeah.
to the next
Yeah.
steps,
Yeah.
which is not thank you, but
Yeah. Next step,
um,
I would suggest, in the plenary 22, that's fully virtual. So we got quite a very interactive online participation. We got a lot of information from that collaborative notes, those few slides you saw before, or from those sessions. Yes. Should we organize like a couple of online sessions along those recommendations? Then fully virtual, so people, some people may have some comment, don't want to speak up, and yeah, so probably virtual version, fully virtual is better to capture than this hybrid. What do you think we can go from here? So definitely we would want to finalize the recommendation. Now is in 2025. Then Any more suggestions from the floor? Yeah. Yes. Do you have any last minute comments?
I think aiming to release the recommendations at P25 and International Data Week would be a great milestone, and it
Yeah.
would give us enough time to organize 2 or maybe 3 online sessions to discuss the recommendations. And as the interest group, we also will have to do some asynchronous communication to get the word out and give people time to prepare and think about the questions and what suits their needs best.
Yep. Okay, so if you are not a member of data versioning group, you can sign up to the data versioning interest group. Then we will communicate through that email mailing list for further actions. With that, we thank you for coming to the sessions and for people joining online, if there is any there. Okay, thanks everyone. Sorry for the hiccup about facilities. Okay, thank you.